Hello, everybody. Welcome to Character Study, a Survivor podcast. My name is Tristan Fluhr. That is Tyler Klimes, and we are getting ready to talk about the creator of the White Lotus, the second place finisher on David vs. Goliath, the 20th place finisher on Survivor 50, Mr. Mike White.
Mr. Mike White himself says that Survivor was more important than an Oscar in the show. Now, is that biased because he was on Survivor? Who knows? Now he has a shot to get there with the success of the White Lotus, and who knows what will come next for him in his career. But he loves Survivor. He's a Survivor super fan, and obviously is now super famous as well. So there's a lot to get into, and I think we just go for it.
Well, and it seems to never be Mike or it's always Mike White,
Yeah, it's
which
Mike
is
White.
always
Yeah.
something that's fun. You know, there are certain players that you call by their first name or their last name. Jeff kept trying to make Kubicki work this season, which
Yeah.
had varying levels of success. But Mike White is always said together, which is
I'm
something I
thinking,
find
honestly,
interesting.
now that you mention that, this is off topic, but like, I feel like that's the case for a lot of Mikes. Like Mike Holloway is often referred to as Mike Holloway. Mike Turner is also referred to
I
as Mike.
think
Is this
that's
just a Mike thing?
I think it's just because the name is common. Like, do
Yeah, but
we?
like, I don't know. There's a lot of common names on Survivor.
That's true. Like, I think with Sarah's, which is another common name, we refer to each of them by Sarah, right?
I don't know. I think Sarah the Sino when you say Sarah.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a fun piece of content at some point. We do like word association with survivor names,
Yeah.
and we think
Yeah. I
who we
don't know.
say it with.
Mike White, whatever you want to say, but
Yeah. So to do a little bit of housekeeping work, who are we? We're media producers and sports people who love the show Survivor. If you didn't like Survivor, why are you watching? We're happy you are, but
yeah. Don't
you might have
leave.
clicked on something by mistake. Happy accident, right? We love the characters that make the show great. And that's what we're trying to analyze. We're trying to analyze what makes these people tick. What are the things that maybe we didn't see? Try to go a little bit deeper into some of these people and really trying to establish who these people are and what makes a great Survivor character.
And there's a lot with Mike. He knows what makes a great character, obviously, from writing some great characters, and he knows what it takes to be on the other side of it. And he's definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to be a main character in your life, all you got to do is follow and like this video, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. That's all the publicity stuff out of the way. Let's get into
He'll
Mike
be a main
White.
character to us, at least.
You'll be a main character to us, and that's really all that matters, right?
Yes, of
Our
course.
opinion is the one that matters. Mike White, 54 years old. He was 47 on David versus Goliath. There's a big time jump between David versus Goliath and Survivor 50, which I don't really think about all that much. You know, you think about 2018 and you're like, that's just a couple of years ago. You know, you don't really think that it's that
It's
long
been a bit
ago. And
now.
then you wake up and almost 10 years ago, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, 7 years. Something that Angelina, I feel like, reflects on a lot. We have a podcast coming up
Yeah.
about her soon. But the same thing for Mike, and a lot changes for Mike within those 7 years. But I think we just start with everything from David versus Goliath, and we can kind of talk about those changes as we go. You good with that?
Yeah. Well, Mike is a writer and a director, as we know, known for projects such as School of Rock. I know he's worked on famously the Emoji Movie, which, if you bring that up too often, ask Rob Cisternino. But what he's most known for is a show called The White Lotus, which is on HBO. Tyler, you a White Lotus guy?
I haven't watched it, no. I just haven't been able to give it a try. I don't know if it's a show I would like or if it's a show I wouldn't. But obviously I know what it is. I know that's a huge cultural phenomena, and hopefully one day I can give it a shot and see if I like it.
I'm gonna plead Chrissy here. I just don't have HBO Max.
Oh, she watched the first two seasons, just not the third one.
I haven't gotten
So
to that point
still
yet.
better than you.
I want to know. I want to know how she watched the first. Like, did she have HBO Max at one point, or did she like pirate it, or what? You know, we're gonna have to talk about
I
that
don't
in the
know.
Chrissy podcast.
Did she switch over to like some different service, the non-cable, until she cut the
It's
cord? I don't know. Like,
it's possible. It's possible. Uh,
yeah.
so let's go ahead and talk about David versus Goliath. One of my very favorite seasons, maybe my second favorite newbie season of all time. I don't think that's a super hot take out there. But Mike comes out and his great social strategy or his great social game saves him from basically being a target almost immediately because he's looking for an idol.
Yeah, it puts a target on his back that he's out there being strategic, but something he says much later in the game as well is that he's just trying to be out here just to look like he's just happy to be here, something that he often wanted to represent and portray with himself. And even though he got caught in scenarios like that, he was able to work himself out. That specific scenario you brought up, Natalie, of all people, comes up to him and says, "Hey, people have been seeing you look for this idol, like you got to be careful." And then he kind of realizes I'm playing a bit too hard out of the gate. His social game was strong enough still to get him past that, and much more as the game goes on.
How much of that do you think was Natalie being kind, and how much do you think that was Natalie really wanted Jeremy out of the game?
It's probably 50-50.
There.
Something that makes this season so great is there are a lot of rivalry and character dynamics throughout the whole season. It's not
Yeah.
just in the pre-merge or the post-merge. It's all over the place and something we'll definitely hit on.
This will be a fun season to break down at some point because there's so much character growth and drama in this season, and so much of what makes this season great is the theme super defined without the
Hmm.
season, and the theme is related to the characters, not as much gameplay. And it really lives there, which I think is cool. You know, themes that are character related that haven't been as successful, like HHH, right? That just doesn't really have an effect on the game. But David versus Goliath is a really universal theme. Mike is absolutely Goliath in his personal life, finds himself as the swing vote two times in the pre-merge. Well, throughout the game, actually. Napalm Natalie boot and the Godfather Carl boot. And
Bing.
Mike ends up. I love Carl. I really do. I mean, underrated return prospect at some point. Carl.
Hmm.
He's great. He ends up setting up the iconic jacket scene with the Natalie boot, which I don't know if you've gone back and watched this in a while.
Oh
For
yeah.
me, it's an every couple of month thing that I watch it. Look at Mike's face. As soon as Angelina asks, Mike has his head in his hands, and it is hilarious. I mean, they cut to it eventually, but look, as soon as Angelina asks, we'll talk about this in Angelina's episode, which is coming up later this week. But I mean, just an all-time reaction in Survivor history from Mike White, and he's the one that sets it up.
He feels like in a lot of situations, he's kind of the bystander watching the craziness happen, especially because he's playing with Angelina throughout the entirety of the game. You kind of just get his perspective as to like how much he's enjoying the entertainment that's in front of him. And that gives us that we have that same perspective so we can relate to him. And everyone's throwing their palms in their face as Mike's doing it. As he sees antics going around, he's saying things when he has a relationship with Jeremy in the pre-merge before he goes out where he's getting bossed around and he's making light of it just like a lot of the audience is. Like he's kind of the audience perspective because he knows
Yeah.
what the audience needs.
Yeah, Mike is a great storyteller, and we're going to talk about that through the podcast. Both people who do storytelling in their career and in their lives. And, there's a lot of Mike that I take inspiration from, especially as, in terms of the social strategy aspect of a reality TV show game, but also the everyday life, what we do for career aspect. Those are all things that are really interesting. And Mike's good at those. And then we get to the point where Mike really realizes that Krishna is the biggest narrative threat to the season. With it being a David versus Goliath season, who's the biggest David of the Davids? Christian Hubicki, who has just charmed the pants off of everyone since the very beginning. Apparently charmed the pants off of Tina Wesson as well, but that's a whole other story.
Oh yeah.
That's a little insider
That
knowledge
one's a
there.
wild one, an unexpected
Um,
one. Yeah,
yeah,
if you know, you know. We won't elaborate.
that'll be a crazy Google search if you don't know. Anyway,
Mhm, yeah.
so final 12, Mike's plan is foiled by the Davids minority vote split. The mayor of Slamtown Tribal Council, where John Hennigan goes out. Final 11, again goes for Christian. Then the idol nullifier against Dan in the final eight. He orchestrates the vote split that ends with Gabby being out once Christian plays the idol, which is a successful move to not have a Goliath go out. So well played by Mike there.
Mhm.
And then at final seven, he wins immunity and finally boots Christian.
A lot of times he found himself in the best spot in the game where he had position to sway, and sometimes he was just outfoxed by others out there, not having all the information, being on a like as the Davids were starting to come together, trying to get himself involved with that as much as possible. Until yeah, eventually he does come after Christian, and that's something that upon reflection, getting ready for this podcast, like is really fun to reminisce on and remember because you kind of have you can understand Christian's dynamic in season 50 when he said like this is what Mike was trying to do to him and did successfully do to him eventually. That can kind of pit these two against each other despite what happened in the 7 years in between both of their seasons.
Yeah, Mike is somebody who has worked with all kinds of people in his life. And he's somebody who, as a writer, as a producer, as somebody who's high up in his business, right? He knows how people tick. That's his whole job, is reading people, is writing people, so it makes total sense that Mike is able to do this. And I really don't think there are very many players that are able to get this level of read on him, like Christian, who had a very big focus on narrative warfare from the very beginning of the season.
Yeah, that's the narrative is the whole key for Mike and what gives him the advantage and something I know we're both very into and excited to talk about. But just sensing that it's like it's not always even reading humans and people, it's reading stories and the narrative that people are trying to drive. And if you can see the story that they're trying to push through their actions and through their humanity, you can cut it off. You can find what you need to find, get out those people that are going to be the real risks at the end of the game. And that's what Mike is so good at doing and finding out and discovering.
Absolutely. And that'll probably be the meat of this podcast once we get into it. But let's go back to David versus Goliath. Let's talk about the end game in DVG. So he leads the charge to boot Davy at the final six. At the final four, wins firemaking against Kara K. Kara K, by the way, I believe was the first player to not have a vote against her and was not in the final three in Survivor up to that point, which
Yeah.
is pretty crazy. Um, he doesn't sell Final Tribal like he wants to win, which is, I mean, it's hard when you have Nick talking and playing the sympathy card that totally fair to play, right? Like I don't think it's wrong if anyone chooses to play that.
I think it's funny the way you worded it there. You said he doesn't sell it like he wanted to win. The way I was going to word it is that he did sell. Like, and what I mean by
Fair.
that is like, you hear like, oh, you sold when yeah, you sold.
You,
You
you're
just,
you're pulling the
you
Gen
had it
Z
right
card.
there
I
and you
see.
let it fall through your fingertips.
Pulling the
Exactly.
Gen
Yeah, I know.
Z.
That's
Yeah,
obviously, I don't think that
that's
word was
what the
probably
cool
not
kids
around
say.
7 years ago in 2018. But yeah, that's kind of what we can look at it now as. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like he was all in it. Like he did want to win. You get the confessionals early in the season that he does want to win Survivor really badly, more than an Oscars, saying that he's in an industry with a bunch of people that want to win the Oscars. He says, "No losers. I want to win Survivor." Like he clearly cares and wants to win the game, but when it comes down to it, he kind of realizes the reality of the situation. And I think just takes his foot off the gas a little bit. He's still driving, he's still
Yeah.
trying, he still ultimately does get 3 votes, but he just slows down and lets Nick run past him.
Yeah, I think taking the foot off the gas is a great analogy. I think that's what happens here. Nick has a strong final tribal that can't be denied, right? And that the jury definitely wasn't going to vote for Angelina. And it was kind of Mike's game to lose, and he didn't sell it as hard as he probably needed to, took his foot off the gas and was kind of like, hey, I'll let the results happen, right? Which I actually think is somewhat of a thing that happens with Mike from time to time. In Survivor 50, there's a certain amount of him kind of taking his foot off the gas too, and that's where he's the most vulnerable because he feels comfortable, which I think is something that's really interesting.
But I think taking your foot off the gas at points in Survivor is a successful thing. Like,
Oh, no doubt. No, yeah, for sure. And in
yeah,
season 50, that's actually the right thing to do
it's what
based
leads
on
to
the
the
way.
winner of that season.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But, and honestly, in the new era, that's it's an effective way of playing.
Yeah, and the way he did that was to make jokes, to bring light to the fact that, again, he's just happy to be here. He would make jokes with Jeff. Obviously, they had a friendship coming into the game. He said, "We got nothing for you either," after they left a challenge one time. Or, "Are you saying people are lying when they're at tribal one time?" Like, he has these iconic one-liners just to Jeff to obviously get a reaction from those in the jury, from those in the game, from those at home watching, from Jeff, but also to lower his threat level and to purposely slow down and let others get ahead of him.
Well, let's blow that up a little bit. Let's talk about that. So let's talk about Mike's thought process going into the season, right? He says, I want this to be a great, iconic season. I want to use my skills as a storyteller to influence my fellow players. In the outcome of this game, boring players beware, which I think all of us heard and we're kind of like, thank you, Mike. Of course, he does this and immediately votes off Q. So,
Yeah.
oh well. And then he says, and to your point about lowering his threat level, he says, I think my reputation is that I'm a likable player who is a stealth strategist. I think I have a target on my back, and I have to appear harmless if I don't want to end up as a trophy on somebody else's wall. He was really effective at this in David versus Goliath by kind of acting like, for lack of a better term, Mike, forgive me, a bumbling idiot at times on
Hmm.
purpose. And Christian, I think, takes a page out of this book, which is funny because Mike calls it out in his
Hmm.
exit press. But yeah, I think Mike's gameplay can really be brought up into three parts: strategy, threat level management, and narrative curation.
And this goes into something I want to ask you because when I
Yeah,
was just going back and trying to find some information on Mike before the game, seeing what his perspective was, he compared himself to two players and two players that I want to ask you about. One, Penner, and
no
two,
doubt.
Rob's sister, Nino. How
Um,
do you see that in his game?
I mean, that's hilarious, first of all. I
Mm.
mean, Mike White couldn't have even wrote that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so perfect, right? Um, but yeah, I spot on, right? Like those are two players who play a very similar style. You know, the storyteller part. I was gonna ask you later if we've ever seen a player like Mike before, and I was just queuing it up for me to talk about Penner because I love Jonathan Penner. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it a million times in this podcast. Jonathan Penner is my legend of the show. He just is,
Hmm.
right? But anyway, it's players that are able to tell a story and use narratives and use threat level and use all these things to their advantage, right? And if you never know, like if Penner plays with a more competent cast for the most part in Cook Islands, who knows what happens, right?
Yeah, we can fully dive into that later. I just wanted to bring that up
Yeah.
before we fully moved on to 50. I think he gets votes from Christian, Kara, and Allison on
Yes,
DVG.
that is true.
So those are the three votes that he ends up getting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Are we ready to move to the 50 of it all?
yeah, let's go for it. You know, he has a
Okay.
big focus on making that entertaining season, goes on a journey, and then immediately comes back.
Hmm.
Literally has
Yeah. Doesn't
a
really go on a journey. Just
seems
goes
like
on a
a
boat
half
ride.
an hour boat ride and gets to meet with Colby and Savannah, where he reports back to his tribe about the retelling of what happened on Exile Island with Coach, Ozzy, and Q. And this sets Coach off, and my winner pick prediction immediately went up in smoke as soon as Mike said this. So slightly frustrated at Mike White. I think Coach had a chance basically until that moment.
Yeah, he got right in the middle of that one, and that seems to be kind of the case for a lot of these pre-merge boots is getting caught in the middle of other people's business.
Hmm.
And some players like Emily were able to find ways to overcome that later on into the game. But yeah, he kind of gets caught. I don't ultimately think it's a reason why he does get voted
Not
out,
at all.
but it's something that definitely makes him a big character in the narrative
Well,
of the
there wasn't
and
anyone on Mike's tribe on his merge tribe, right? On his original tribe, there's nobody from Kalo on New Vatu, right?
Um, I think,
Because it was Colby, or no, it was Angelina, Mike, Christian, Emily, Ozzy, and Steph.
hmm
Yeah, so
yeah,
I
when they
think,
swapped.
and
Yeah.
Q.
hmm
Yeah, so I did. Yeah, Mike was
Yeah.
on paper you would think in trouble, but also you have a pretty favorable tribe swap in terms of people he's played with before. And that's what makes these returning seasons interesting is because past relationships are always going to play a factor, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
hmm
They're all going to play a factor. And sometimes they're good until they're bad. Look
Yeah.
at Parvati and Amanda in Heroes versus Villains, right? Amanda with the worst lie in Survivor history. Not like
hmm
dead grandma, but just like poorly executed. But
Yeah, yeah.
not what I meant by bad. But, yeah, I just think that prior relationships are interesting, and it's a huge part of Mike's journey on season 50.
Yeah, and just knowledge of who he is. Like he comes into David versus Goliath on the Goliath tribe for having a successful career. And then he comes into 50 as this mega Goliath, right? Where he's a Goliath on Survivor Goliaths, but also a Goliath outside of the game as well. So he has that reputation. And because of that, he realizes again, he needs to kind of just come into the game and try and play under the radar. He says things in the first episode like he feels like it was a high school reunion meets a massacre, like all these big names that are all going for each other. And again, he wanted to get himself like into the mix, trying to hide in the background rather than up front with the sword or whatever it may be. And he says like, I wanted to go on the season because I had major FOMO issues. He didn't want to miss out. And it's just something where he definitely didn't really have to be here because he could be writing the White Lotus, which he ultimately does after he gets voted out. He could be doing all these things with a successful career. Tristan, I kind of want to just pose this to you. What do you think brings Mike back to the game? What entices him to season 50?
Well, Mike talks about it in his opening press. He says, "I've been working nonstop the last 5 years in a highly scrutinized and high pressure job, dealing with lots of high maintenance people with big personalities. I feel like this will be a cakewalk." He was basically using this as vacation, as a break. He's friends with Jeff. He's friends with production. He probably knew it was going to put a lot more eyeballs on White Lotus. So it seemed like a good decision. And I think he has a genuine love for the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something about the game that allures him. Like he's played The Amazing Race twice, now Survivor twice. Am I a little salty that he probably took Jonathan Penner's spot on season 50? Maybe a little, but that's a whole other can of worms. Like that's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I definitely think that Mike felt like he had unfinished business, and I think it's because probably he felt like he didn't go as hard at the end as he wanted to of David versus Goliath.
I thought your answer was gonna for sure be he just wanted to show off the abs, but that works as well.
I mean, the six pack, we got to talk about it. I mean,
Oh
just
yeah.
unreal. He's 54.
He said he was waiting for months for people to see this. He
He's
must have been
shredded.
training hard. Yeah, I mean like you have like probably a lot of people in their 20s, including ourselves, looking at him in his 50s, being like, "Wow, I want to look like that." Like it's
It's
impressive.
crazy. If I looked like that when I'm 30, much less 50,
Yeah,
then it's a miracle. So, um, shout out Mike, shout out White Lotus Gym, shout out to whatever
yeah, whatever got him
trainer,
that.
whatever nutritionist he's working with, because they're doing a good job. And I hope they got some of his probably very large appearance fee
True.
in
But
terms of coming
kind of
back.
to answer my own question, obviously getting that had to get the six pack out of the way. But
Hmm.
something he says on 50 is that when he would have hard days on set shooting 100 and whatever day shoots that he's out there, he would look back on a Survivor experience and say, I did that. I can do this. I did hard things on Survivor. In comparison, this is a lot easier. I have food. I have people around me that I can trust. I have all these things. I can call my family. I can do what I want. But I did Survivor, so I can do this. And I think he kind of wanted to rekindle that feeling, to get that flame back that he can use in his life to continue to move him forward, not just through the White Lotus, but through his life.
But you know what? Mike White and I aren't all that different. When we have a hard day, we go get a six pack and watch some Survivor. It's not that different. Like,
Different six pack.
I really? You don't think so? No, yeah. A different six pack, and I watch and he plays. That's the difference between me and Mike White. The one of
Yeah,
many, but um, had to throw
that
that
was
in
good.
there.
That was good.
Um, Before the tribe swap, right? He finds himself in the middle of Kahlo with Charlie, who we're talking
Mhm.
about Charlie this time next week. So that's
Yep.
well positioned in terms of when and where. We'll talk Charlie, but um, yeah, when we get to the merge tribe, he leads the Q boot.
Yeah.
Q asks Mike to vote for him, and Mike's like, "Well, I'll take it to the bank." And literally, the voting confessional says, "Hey, you told me to do this."
It's like a get out of jail free card. Like, oh, you're telling
Yeah,
me I can do this bad thing against you and you're not going to hold it against me? Like, that's perfect. But kind of going back to Charlie, I just wanted to hit on that. Um, had they stayed on that original tribe and not gotten swapped or had things moved around for them in the game, to me, that feels like an alliance that was going to stick, something that was
agreed.
going to last a long way into the game. What do you think that looks like had they been able to stay together to the merge and beyond?
I think it's pretty similar to Mike and Alec from David vs. Goliath. I think Alec has some similarities to Charlie. Charlie's obviously more strategic than Alec. Alec was more of the challenge guy, but I think that, Mike is somebody who with his job, right, works with a lot of younger people and knows how to relate and knows how to connect. And, I would have liked to see what an alliance of Mike White and Charlie and Dee and Tiffany and Camilla could have done on original Kahlo. I mean, I think that would have been a really fun group, but at the same time, it doesn't work that way. But I do think that Charlie and Mike are in it for the long haul, and if you need any more proof, Charlie's literally going to be on Mike's show in a prominent role, the biggest role a
Yeah,
Survivor has ever had on the
it
White
seems like
Lotus.
it.
I mean, it's not a cameo. It's like actually he's in the like he's on the red carpet for the show. It's
I don't
unbelievable.
know. I don't know. Maybe Charlie was out there. You know how they did the talent show. Maybe that's what sold him.
Yeah, that
Maybe
very
that
well
talent
could.
show
Well, I think
performance
Mike
with
was gone
Jonathan.
at that point, or Mike was on a different tribe. But
Yeah, but I
you're
think
you're
Mike
you're
maybe
true.
watches the show
That's
proper
fair.
and says, "Wow, I need that." Sorry, Jonathan, he didn't make the cut, but Charlie, I need that.
Do you
It
think he
is
could?
Jonathan, right? That's who he does it with. They have like the
Yeah.
fight. Yeah.
Well, you think he's just like a stunt performer, or do you think he's like actually in the show?
There may be some studs involved as well, but I'm sure they got doubles out there.
They could call Ryan Gosling from The Running Man and give him some
Yeah,
training.
there we go. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so then we move from the Q boot to what turns
Mhm.
out to be the Mike boot.
Yeah.
I know you and I thought before the season Mike was basically a lock to make the merge. So this was pretty surprising, it happening this early.
It definitely, I don't think it was too crazy for me. I'm trying to go back to my boot list and see where I had him. But as the season went on, I started to think, oh, Mike's going to make it far into the game because he was so well positioned. And he, especially when they swap, he has a relationship obviously with Christian and Angelina from David vs. Goliath, and also has a relationship with Ozzy on that tribe as well. They knew each other just from living in the same area in California. They have a connection
Who knew?
through a restaurant, and yeah, it just ends up helping him out, and he's in a great position on that tribe. Originally, I had Mike going out 22nd in my
Oh
preseason
wow.
boot
I,
order,
I
so
think
I
I
wasn't
had him
too
in the
far off.
merge.
Yeah, so I wasn't too far off preseason, but as it
Yeah.
was going on, it felt like he could make a run, but gets cut short because of a play that I don't think is necessarily a bad one, but it's just someone who understands Mike's game.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. So Mike tells Christian because Emily has been spilling the beans on Christian, and Mike successfully determines that Christian and Emily are working together and they are close. Mike knows how to exploit this because he knows Angelina's on the chopping block. Mike basically sets a moving screen in front of Angelina and
Hmm.
says, "Hey, this is this is what this situation is. I think Emily is your new Gabby to Christian. After Emily spills Christian's secrets multiple times, Mike's also trying to get himself ahead. It's a whole cornucopia of things that leads to this. But then it gets to the point where it causes Christian to have Vietnam flashbacks back to David versus Goliath, to his relationship with Gabby, to his deteriorating relationship. And now they're really close friends still, but still, I mean, Gabby very much tried to take Christian out of the game. It didn't
Hmm.
work because Christian had an idol, but like Christian's game was unraveled at the very next vote.
And it's just tough because, like I mentioned before, this is subtle manipulation that on a lot of players is going to work. But doing that to Christian, a player who has a close connection with Mike himself, and is playing a very similar style of game as Mike is himself. And Christian saying he wants to use narrative warfare. That's the exact same angle that Mike's coming at it with. And Christian has that perspective to realize, hey, this is what he's trying to do. This is why he said this to me. And this is why I ultimately need to go after him now because that is dangerous. That is a player that I would vote for to win this game, as he does originally in David versus Goliath. That is what shifts his mind to go after him. So it's really a good move that is just sensed. And because of how good the move is, it's looked at as a threat.
This works like 89% of the time.
Yeah.
This probably works against most players in Survivor history. Like
Hmm.
the only players it probably doesn't work on are a Jonathan Penner, a Rob Sesternino, a Boston Rob, a Suri, right? These players. It definitely wouldn't work on Russell. Actually, it might work on Russell. Yeah,
Well,
Russell can,
that's a wild card.
yeah, yeah. Russell can go chase something though. Um, but yeah, so I mean, this works against most players, but it's unique that we know that Christian was so in tune with narrative warfare. I think that shows a lot of why this vote happened and what happened here. That Christian was uniquely in tune, and I think that that's something that maybe is a little inside baseball to a certain extent, but I also think is super relevant to what ended up happening in the game.
Something that Mike says about his game is that he's playing like a Machiavellian puppet master style of game. With a lot of the players in the season, like you said, maybe 89% of the time, 90% of the time, those puppets aren't going to realize that they're being puppeted. They're just going to dance and do their thing. But Christian is not a puppet in Mike's life. They are friends. They have history. There's so much more that goes beyond that. To try and puppet him is probably where it just ends up falling apart for him.
At least they were friends.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
talk about
Hopefully
that.
they get back to that, but
I do too. Um,
yeah.
So actually, the next thing is the vote that ends up taking out Mike. It's a 3-2-1 vote from Christian, beautifully
Yeah.
orchestrated. We'll talk about this in Christian's episode in a couple of weeks, whether we think this is a good move, bad move, whatever. I know there was a lot of discourse at the time, and honestly, I think the jury's still out, believe it or not. I don't know if it helped or hurt his game, but we know what Mike thinks about it.
Hmm.
And let's talk about some of the drama with Christian postseason. So, in his exit press, Mike White says, I mean, the thing about Christian is I caught him originally with the whole thing about Emily telling people about the idol that was given. He told me one story, then he changed his story. He was doing a lot of crazy stuff. But the thing about Christian, to be honest, he's a little hammy. So it felt like, oh, he's doing this for attention for the cameras or something. But because he's pratfalling, he's doing a lot of crazy antics, and I was just like, maybe this is him hamming it up for the cameras or something. But at the core of it, I was just like, he's not gonna come for me. I felt so safe.
Interesting the way he uses the phrase hamming it up for the cameras.
But
Obviously his career.
because I almost feel like this is kind of a page out of Mike's book to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it does feel like that. And every Survivor player, especially on a returning season, they know what they're in for. They're going
Yeah.
to ham it up to the cameras. But Mike's job in real life is to be on the other side of the camera and to direct people
Yeah.
that are in front of the camera to say, hey, that felt unnatural. That didn't feel right. Like, just be who your character is on the show and who you're portrayed like like there's all of that, and he can sense that and he can feel that, and that's ultimately what I think both of them kind of have that perspective where they can sense the underlying tension that's there because of reality that they're trying to ham it up for the cameras, but also trying to play a game for $1 million.
Why do you think this is such a big piece of drama?
I think, and I don't know this at all. I want to ask you the same thing as soon as I'm done with that. So perhaps prepare something for yourself as well. But I think Mike looks at this as you asked the question earlier, is this the best move for Christian in this game? I think he looks at it as this was not Christian's best move. This was something that he wanted to do because maybe there was some personal tension behind it that he didn't want to get bested by Mike again, and that he was just feeling bad about that, and that there's just so much history there, and that they could have really played the game moving forward together, even though I don't know if that actually would have happened. It just feels like if he thought, oh, maybe this was definitely the best move for Christian, I was definitely going to come for him like right after this. Then maybe he's sitting there saying, okay, good game. But he goes out, and when he gets voted out, he calls the players that voted him out skunks. Take that as you will. I'm not necessarily sure what that insult means, but we can dive into that later. But yeah, it's just I think it just kind of hurt him inside. It hurt his soul and didn't feel like a gameplay move.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. I think that there probably is a little bit of unresolved hurt there. From the original time they played on David vs. Goliath, from Christian's perspective, I definitely think, Emily talked about this in her preseason press. She said, I don't want to get bested by D again. Like, how embarrassing to get beat by the same person twice, And I think a lot of players feel that way. That's why these players that have previous relationships, they don't really want to work with each other after a certain point eventually down the line, which makes it so shocking why Ozzy is just willing to throw out the red carpet for Suri. Great for Suri, and it turned out to be a great relationship and alliance and some great television this season, but just something fascinating. But I do agree that Mike, I think, was looking at it from a gameplay perspective because Mike is somebody who's very into the game. Like, he's maybe the most game body celebrity, and I say that as a compliment. Like, all these celebrities that like the show, this guy knows the show.
That's definitely rare. I'm trying to think back. I used the word skunk earlier, and I said I don't really know what it means. I'm trying to kind of rationalize it because it's something I've never thought about. And as I was doing that, and you had a great response as well, but I was trying to come up with what that could really mean. And I think it relates to the
AKA, you were
conversation
not
so
listening
well
to what I
because
just said.
oh no, you had a wonderful point. My internet started to go out, and I came
Uh,
up with a point about 10 seconds into your thing, and then I
there we
locked
go.
in. Um, but like what skunks are known for, obviously, is for their spray and for the stench they leave on people, right? And the fact that that stench is hard to get off, like
Yeah.
a lot of times you have like a fire smell, you can go in the shower and it might stick for a little bit, but it's gonna come out. Like with the skunk, it's like, oh, you came after me, and it's lasting. It's not going anywhere. This is painful. This is something that I'm going to have to deal with and process in order to finally get rid of for a while. And I think the word skunk is a perfect encapsulation of that. Whether Mike intended it to be or for it not to be, it's something that's continuing to stick with him, something that he can't get off even if he tries, and it's just going to take time before it eventually fades away.
I don't even care if you're listening to what I said. That was brilliant. So with Mike, you think about this is the first time he's ever been voted out of the game. That
Yeah.
has an effect. Most people, you see it on
Mhm.
their first appearance. But for Mike, it's on his second. He made it to the end his first game. The first time getting voted out of this game hurts. You hear so many people talk about the second time getting voted out is so much easier. Mike's never had that experience to go off of before. So this is all as fresh as it would be in his first season. And I think to a certain extent, some of us as super fans are like, dude, get over it. This is your second time playing. You're a multimillionaire. If the game means a lot to you and you've never had that experience before, I think that's a very fair reaction.
And I say to that, hey, that's good. The game does mean a lot to you. We
Yeah.
need players, and especially if you're going to be someone who's famous or a celebrity, we need those types of people that are going to care. And it's not to say, I mean, sometimes, yes, I do enjoy chaos and tension and some like corruption in relationships where you can get those arguments, um, because it makes for good TV. But it is nice to have people that care enough to get those reactions. So yeah, you could say get over it, Mike, but I think that makes him a character that a lot of people like and we're happy to see again, not just because of the White Lotus of it all.
Do you think if Mike has this level of fame, do you think if the White Lotus comes out in 2017 that Mike ends up on Survivor at all? Do you think he's almost too big of a
We've
star?
seen plenty of, I would argue if like is Jimmy Johnson a bigger face that gets on the show? I know
I
that's a different
mean, but Jimmy
casting.
Johnson,
Yeah.
he's, I mean, he was still doing the TV, but
Yeah.
like if Jimmy Johnson was still the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes, or if he's still in his really terrible run with the Dolphins, maybe, but I don't
Yeah,
know
I
at
think there's
that
also a
point.
connection with Jeff there that plays
True.
a major impact on it. So
And it played a major impact of him being on 50. Apparently, he was one of the first
definitely.
calls that production made. How does Mike's life work make him a unique Survivor character?
I think you were asking how does Mike's life work? I'm like, I don't
Oh,
know.
no,
I
no,
see what
no.
you're saying.
No. How
His
does his
work and
life
his
work?
life.
Life
Yeah.
work.
It's like, you gotta ask him that question. We can analyze. I don't know.
We're going to
Um,
psychoanalyze Mike White's work life.
yes.
That's why you clicked on this
Um,
podcast.
I It's something we've talked about a lot throughout the podcast,
Yeah.
and I'm glad we're getting to the point where we can totally dive headfirst into it. But it's understanding the narratives, like we said. He compares himself to Penner and to Rob Cesternino. It's exactly that. Knowing that, like, in order to make an entertaining season, you have to do entertaining things, but if you want to make it far, you need to mix that entertainment of being the main character as well as being the fan with the popcorn watching on the big screen. And he's able to do that in both ways. Being at a shoot, saying we need to do this, we need to do that, stepping in, making these actions, and then getting into the editing room later and maybe saying certain things about, ooh, how does this impact how we want people to feel? How can we change this up just a little bit to fully get the impact of what we want on our audience? And he can do that with players, and the jury is an audience. In David vs. Goliath, he makes it to the jury phase. Here he doesn't, but he has so many captive audiences that he can reel in using his skills in his work life.
And I think that's what makes Mike such a great player. Not just a great player, but also an effective player. He's somebody who is able to he really makes the producer's job pretty easy in terms of the storytelling. These great confessionalists, these great people who understand plot lines and storylines and how things ebb and flow. I have to think that as a producer and editor, that's a dream. I know when we're interviewing athletes and they can retell how things happened in more detail than what we would expect. It's beautiful, and we request them every time we have a video.
Yeah.
We all have an athlete like that. And I think that it's kind of the same thing with some of these characters. Like if you're casting a season and you want somebody who's going to be almost in on the joke to a certain extent, and it's not the right term, but almost your Jim from The Office, right? Your character that you're going to be like, okay, I can see myself there realizing. I think Rizzo does this really well too. I think he's really effective at this, but Mike is also there too, as these characters that are very aware of the meta.
That does play an impact. Looking back early in Survivor's history, it really wasn't there. But as you get into the 40s and now we're into the 50s, that is a big thing. You're looking at outside perspectives, like even at home on a returning player season, like our players saying, I'm just going to use the first episode as an example. Like, we don't want to vote out Suri because that's going to make the audience really mad. Like, those are things you need to think about going into returning season on big seasons, and he knows that as well as a lot of the players do. But he's able to utilize that.
especially with the current climate of Survivor social media. Because,
Hmm.
boy, if you make a move they do not agree with, they are none too kind
Yeah,
to you. So,
yeah.
not that I think Mike White pays attention to trolls online. Something tells me that if you do that and you're in this industry, might be a rough ride.
Well, you can do it, but you have to laugh at it. You have
That's
to
true.
say,
Yeah, that's a good
yeah,
point.
you
Yeah,
can't take it personally.
yeah. I'm going to talk about the Angelina of it all. Obviously, later this week on Friday, we're going to have an episode about Angelina. Was his friendship with Angelina an anchor this season to his game?
I almost feel like he's anchored to Angelina in David versus Goliath as well, and that works out for him because she's always in front of him doing these big things, and yeah, he's attached to her, but she's the one going out there and doing it, right? Whereas that helps because he could stay in the background before. In 50, they have that same anchor, and I love the way you put that. Um, and now Angelina's not going out there and putting herself forward. She's the more calm version of Angelina. And now he's anchored to her, but she does end up being voted out in a similar spot. But she's not doing things that are crazy enough to kind of let Mike go in the background. He's pushed forward because has a relationship with a player who is a threat, but isn't looked at as someone who's like this wild, crazy like show.
Yeah. Before we go, I do want to bring something up from Mike's preseason press. And I want to shout this from the rooftops. Mike consults on the game. I hope this was communicated. I hope we bring this into the open era. Mike says,
Hmm.
I hope the votes of the fans influence the producers to minimize random advantages and twists. Character is plot. Great characters create great stories.
Come on the show, Mike.
Well done. Well done, Mike. Okay.
Yeah.
You have an open invitation if you ever want to come on our podcast. Just brilliant. Brilliant. Uh, yes, all of it. Say it over and over again. Uh, so much now in modern Survivor, it is about the twist, but I think why people fall in love with this show are the characters and the people, and that's the whole thesis statement of this show that we do. So, um, yeah, I hope that that's something that is again put on with seasons 51 and beyond.
And tying along to that, what type of character do you think Mike is? This is something we ask in every episode. Do you think he's looked at as a hero, a villain, or an anti-hero? And kind of just a second part of that question, do you think he realizes which one he wants to be going into a season and leans into that?
I don't know if Mike fits in any of the categories. I think he's the narrator. In the story, right? You have a hero, you have a villain, you also have a narrator. Sometimes the narrator is the protagonist, but I think he's like kind of the voice of God in the story. Like he's there, right? But he's like maybe a character that's just like not shown or whatever. But if we have to do one of the three, I'm gonna say hero. I think. I think. If nothing else, for his undying loyalty to Angelina.
Hmm.
I could see anti-hero. On 37, I think it was definitely more of like kind of an anti-hero game from Mike, but um, I'd say he's a hero. What do you think? He's hard to place.
I would say hero as well. Watching him play, and you could say this about other players, but it feels more true for Mike. It's like reading a first person novel
Yeah.
where it's like you're getting the perspective of other people and seeing what happens through his eyes a lot of the times, and you're just getting that narrative and understanding who people are, obviously getting their stories as well, but him just being the main one that it kind of all ties back to. It really in David vs. Goliath because he goes far, but you even get that in the a couple episodes of 50.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation about Mike, and we want to keep this discourse going. If you have anything you want to say about Mike White, put it in the comments section down below. We're happy to read and respond and keep conversations like this going. That's how we keep the buzz around this show going. That's how we keep making great conversations. It's almost the improv strategy of the yes and, right? We're going to try to find something else that we might not have discovered or talked about. And if you have something you want us to talk about, put it in the comments section. Maybe we'll start a mailbag at some point.
Yeah.
We'll start going. We're really trying to get this thing up off the ground. And if you want to be, like we said, a main character, go ahead and follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, like, subscribe, follow, do all the things. We'd really appreciate it. Tyler, you got anything else for us before we wrap?
Nothing of substance. I just think maybe that's a, like you have like the Swifties or whatever, like the fans, like maybe our fans can just be called the main characters.
I think that's a good
Be a
point.
main character. Like and
Everyone wants to be a main character.
Like and
we might
subscribe if you
have
will.
launched it. When we're big, you can say, "Hey, I was there when they came up with it." Right?
Yeah, I
Never
was one of
know.
the first main characters.
This is like when I'm sure people were like when Rhett and Link came up with mythical beasts. They were like, "Oh, we were the first ones." Right?
Yeah.
You never know. But anyway, that's all we got time for here on Survivor Character Study. If you haven't checked out our podcast last week with Savannah and Q, go ahead and do so. On Friday, we have our podcast with Angelina. Then next week, we're on to Charlie and Camilla, two White Lotus people. It's White Lotus 2 weeks here on Survivor Character Study. Maybe I'll get an HBO subscription, but probably not. For Tyler Klimes, this has been Tristan Fluhr saying so long and see you in the next one.